is a chicken worth more than a lion?
Is it?
To me, at the moment, yes.
Okay.
Now, people would say to me that's wrong, but I'm dealing with a situation where I've got 15,000 lions left in the whole of Africa.
And billions of chickens being murdered every year.
But those billions of chickens are produced in a system, and you can debate the methods of that and the morality of it, but I don't have time to worry about the chickens compared to the lions.
You don't have to worry about them, you can just not eat them. That's a simple thing to do.
You're asking me a question.
So you organised this event, didn't you?
Yes, I work for two charities. I run a charity called the Badger Trust, which looks after that species here in the UK, but also I work for Born Free, which is an international charity that does work in Africa and around the world on lions and elephants. So my work is wildlife protection, but I have a personal interest in this issue. I came last year to speak here at the embassy. I'm looking maybe to speak at a major conference in the US on this coming up in a few months as well.
Fantastic.
So really, I speak a lot about wildlife and animal welfare issues, but I just thought giving a voice to this is an important opportunity.
Why is it so important to you, then, Yulin Dog?
Well, I'm a dog owner, and to me this is horrible. I talk a lot about China and work with Chinese officials and governments, diplomats and things on issues like ivory and international wildlife trade. And I think, we need to give a similar voice to this because it's an animal welfare issue, not a wildlife protection one. But it does go to the very heart of how we treat animals, disease control, because there's some big issues around that about rabies and things. And I think there's a growing concern in China about how this trade is playing out in the world, how it leads to exploitation, greed and illegal activity in the country itself. And of course disease control concerns they have. So I think we're making headway to get the Chinese government to think actually maybe this isn't a good thing that we should be seeing in our country any longer. And the Chinese diaspora outside, in places like London here, if you go to University College London and other facilities, you've got some of the brightest next generation of leaders of China in this city.
That's right.
And when you talk to them, they don't want to be involved in this either.
So it's safe to say with the charities that you do and the work you're involved in, you're kind of like a spokesperson against animal cruelty?
Yes.
Yeah. Does that apply to all animals or only certain
No, the
animals?
species that I get involved with. So the badger is one that I work particularly in here in the UK. There's a big debate about TB in cattle and if the badger spread it to cattle and if they should be killed or not. I'm very involved in that discussion, which is a big political debate. I do a lot of work on lion protection, particularly looking at trophy hunting, how we can reduce demand for trophies. I did a lot of work around the Cecil shooting and media activity around that, of course. A lot on the elephant poaching issues and ivory and rhino horn, but also quite a bit on marine mammals species, particularly Taji and the dolphin trade, and also what we're seeing with the Faroe Islands and pilot whales as well.
That's amazing.
So it's a wide variety of work.
And do you eat meat yourself?
I'm not a full vegan. I do eat fish. I have that discussion and debate with some people here. I'd like to maybe make that journey to veganism. I'm not saying it's easy because it is not.
No.
When people ask me why it is you haven't made it, I said, well, personally, it's something I think I find it quite difficult to stick to. I am concerned that if we just say that actually people can only speak up for animals if they're vegan, I have this debate all the time. If I said that to all the people that support the charities I'm employed by, I wouldn't have a job. If it came to expecting only a tiny part of the population to stand up for wildlife or animal welfare because they were vegan, we miss a huge number of other people. And I think the arguments I make is that veganism in itself is a good path that we should all seek to take, but if we try and break people out if they're not vegan and say that they can't defend or speak up for animal welfare, wildlife protection, I think that's counterproductive.
Sure, do you think there's any difference between killing a dog to eat it and killing a pig to eat it?
There's a difference between the relationships. Now, you can say why that happens, but those relationships go back hundreds of thousands of years. The relationship we have with dogs particularly is more complex. People would argue with me that you could have similarly complex relationships with pigs. I'm not saying that couldn't be the case. But what I am saying is that if you look at the global animal welfare situation, there are, strict rules for how you can deal with dogs and cats in terms of welfare legislation, in terms of how those animals are to be treated. And I see this as an animal welfare issue. To be at the end of the day, the animal's eaten, but actually it's what happens to it before it's eaten.
So you're not necessarily against the dog being eaten?
I don't like the dog meat trade.
But that's not what you're campaigning against?
The campaign, in my view, should be about how the animals are abused and treated to the point they're killed. Because they are animal welfare issues. And if you found a dog that was, beaten, was put in a cage, was, dragged on the back of a truck for 14 hours in Britain, it would be illegal under animal welfare law. The individual involved could be prosecuted for it.
So if the people in Yulin treated dogs like we treat pigs in this country, i.e. chopping their tails off anaesthetic, pulling their teeth out, castrating them when they're piglets, would that be acceptable?
I don't think any of that's acceptable in terms of modern farming methods. I think we all know that those things go on.
Yeah.
There are good and bad systems. Some are better, some are worse. But to say to the Chinese that, because this farming system operates in Western Europe or North America, we'll give you a free pass on everything you do with dog and cats, in my view, personally, is not right. I know some people would say to me, you should, because you'll know better. But you still have that huge suffering of these animals, which I think if you can bring to a close, then I think you can improve animal welfare across a broad range of areas in China. And that's good for the world. And that could be in Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam.
Sure. So if we were in China right now, and millions of people were signing petitions and going to the British embassy campaigning that people in Britain stopped eating bacon, how do you think we'd react in this country?
Well, no, you could, there'll be a response, I would have thought, to say, well, we set various standards and requirements for production. These standards are overseen by law. People can be prosecuted for breaking them. And the argument back would be, well, there's no real, situation where you could guarantee highest animal welfare standards if you're killing the animal.
Yeah.
Okay? But whatever you think about our systems of production for meat, they are in a legally binding process of how animal welfare and livestock and veterinary medicine and other things have to be worked.
It's legally binding in this country,
doesn't mean it's not abuse.
Yeah.
Okay. But in the situation we're talking about in Yulin, there's no control at all.
But it's legal in China, like the way we treat pigs is legal in Britain. So by what you're saying about legally binding, it is legally binding in China to do what they do to dogs, is it not?
Well, there isn't. It's basically the law of the land doesn't apply. This is a business that's largely back street, no controls. These are people's pets often being stolen and put into this business.
Yeah.
There's no legislation on how these animals are housed, on when they should be seen by vets, on the situation they should be in prior to them being slaughtered.
Yeah, okay.
This is basically, you could be in the back room of any sort of establishment in Yulin or another city, butchering dogs in the most disgusting conditions, risking your health and other people's as a result of some of those diseases that could be transmitted in some of the biggest urban populations in the world.
Right.
And there's no control. So,
What about the antibiotic resistance that we're having in Europe and Britain at the moment? Is it the same?
We're beginning to realise that our over-reliance on antibiotics and our meat trade could be having an impact on our health.
Yeah.
That's one issue that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
But we need to understand that, the pathogens that can pass the zoonosis type diseases between animals to humans in very densely populated areas can lead to outbreaks of disease like rabies or SARS that don't
MRSA,
stay at borders, that can move quickly in a modern world where we live in these huge urban conurbations of 5 or 6 million people. You could have a global outbreak of a disease that we couldn't control, that could have come out of a slaughter pen that was, of animals in a place like China with no control.
Or in a place like Britain. So basically what you're saying is a really fantastic argument to shut down all slaughterhouses.
It would be more difficult to happen in Britain and America. It doesn't mean it couldn't.
Yeah.
But at least you've got international laws and rules that should be applied. That doesn't mean they couldn't be abused. But if you're in places like China where you've got none, then I think the risk is higher, and that's the point.
Okay,
so there is an element.
So it's about eliminating the high risks rather than just eliminating all risks.
I don't think you can eliminate all risk unless you eliminate the whole food chain for the production of meat. And there's a lot of logical issues to say that, because for health, for animal welfare, disease control. But we have a situation where you have large numbers of people consuming these products, and you have regulatory systems that have to operate.
So what would it take for you to go vegan?
I think that, in my view, it probably, and I'll be honest with you, there's a certain amount of, what you feel you wish to eat and how you eat it and what your views are on it. I still eat some fish. I do look at how that fish is produced. Could I give it up? Yes, I could. Will I? I think I probably will at some point.
Okay.
But I'll say this to you. I think you've got to be able to cultivate a means by which people can take those decisions in their own time, in their own way, and feel they're doing it for the right reasons. And I think that's part of the difficulties that some people have making that move, because they might feel under a lot of pressure from other individuals to do so. And it throws up a lot of dilemmas, because if you're vegan, you can't, in many ways, there are certain animals you can feed a vegan diet to, but cats, it's not good.
Cats, no, that's
very
true.
difficult. Dogs you can feed a soya-based diet to. Some dogs take to that better than others. But a lot of companion animals, you are feeding the products of mass industrial meat production to those animals, even if you are in itself not consuming it yourself.
You were saying about how it can be difficult for people to go vegan because they need to come to that decision in their own time without feeling pressure. Do you think it's the same about people in Yulin when they harm dogs? They put too much pressure and they should come to that decision on their own time?
Well, dog meat consumption in China is relatively new in places like Yulin.
Okay.
This tradition of eating dog meat goes back a few hundred years, but it's nothing on the scale of what you've got in places like Korea.
Yeah.
And there are questions about why this sort of trade developed. It was almost in Yulin, it was just a means, funny enough, of this new rapidly growing city. It was seen as a means of sort of, a culinary promotion almost, that we were going to do this. This would bring people in.
Yeah.
And there's this belief in the midsummer when it's hot that if you inflict huge pain and suffering on a dog, increase its stress level, and then you eat the meats, you're actually going to cool off and feel better as a result of heat exhaustion or stroke. Now that is a weird thing, but clearly it's a view. Now I argue with people about the consumption of rhino horn because they believe it's going to deal with cancer or make them an aphrodisiac, or lion bones in wine. These debates go on, and most of it is absurd. There's no scientific logic behind it, but it's a belief, and it leads to the destruction of animals, so you have to deal with that.
Okay, so just one final question, I'm really sorry. So do you think that it is hypocritical of people in the West to consume meat and condemn others for consuming dog flesh or cat flesh?
I don't personally think it is, because I think if you gave a free pass to China, Korea, Vietnam and Thailand because of our industrial meat production on the issue of dogs and cats, when we in those societies treat those animals in a particular way, we spend billions of pounds on healthcare provision for them, on food for them. They're our companions for life. They have a huge impact, as I said earlier on, in our sort of overall mental, physical health. They play a huge role in our medical treatments, in our physical well-being to deal with, mental breakdowns and problems, or rescue and security issues that we deal with. So those relationships are extremely important and special.
So that makes their life worth more than another animal's?
You're going to get into a debate about that all the time. I have a debate, is a chicken worth more than a lion?
Is it?
To me, at the moment, yes.
Okay.
Now, people would say to me that's wrong, but I'm dealing with a situation where I've got 15,000 lions left in the whole of Africa.
And billions of chickens being murdered every year.
But those billions of chickens are produced in a system, and you can debate the methods of that and the morality of it, but I don't have time to worry about the chickens compared to the lions.
You don't have to worry about them, you can just not eat them. That's a simple thing to do.
If you're asking me a question, if I have to make a priority, in what I do, all right, I could campaign on the chickens, or I could campaign on the lions.
Sure.
Okay, the chickens are not going to disappear tomorrow. That doesn't make industrial chicken production right. But the lions, this is really important, could in a few decades be gone, and that's hundreds of millions of years of evolution that would disappear from the African continent. That, to me personally, is far more important.
So you can campaign on behalf of lions, and all you have to do for chickens is not eat them. And you can still do all the work you do now, and then help chickens
But
as well.
you asked me a question as to whether you put the two together as having the same status. It's not about my personal view on eating them. I'm giving you an answer, and my personal view is no. If you said I'm a species in terms of how I deal with those issues, yes, most definitely.
Humans more important.
It's just the nature of the work we have to do. Because everything I do, to be honest with you, and the work I do, internationally or nationally, it's about compromise, and it's about having to give priorities to certain issues over others. So you have to give priority to a lion problem because the numbers are falling so quickly. We have debates in Africa, in some countries where we have more elephants than we have in others. Do you cull elephants in one country or move the elephants to another? I disagree fundamentally with culling of animals. I don't disagree with maybe looking at reproduction methods where you might be able to reduce their numbers in certain areas. I believe that repopulation in moving animals, like we're doing with rhinos and to a degree we've done with elephants, can work as well. And at the end of the day, I also believe the animals must have enough space to live in. So we need proper corridors for them to move and to live in their natural landscapes. If we're encroaching on that with our towns and cities, if we're making it impossible for a lion to live without coming into conflict with humans where it's killed, or a tiger or an elephant, then I think that's wrong. So you've got to sort of come to those degrees. They're difficult decisions as well.
You bet. So is a human's life worth more than an animal's life, any non-human animal's life?
Well, I debated about the gorilla in Cincinnati Zoo, Harambe. I think personally that they probably had little choice on the day in that zoo to kill the gorilla, but I never wanted to see the child go in with the gorilla in the first place. And the gorilla should never have been there, exploited in a concrete prison, effectively, where it was left, where its life was put into that situation. So I think everything was wrong. But at the end of the day, if I was one of the individuals that had to take the decision, I understand why they had to take it. But I would think it's morally wrong that the animal was ever put in that position.
It is morally wrong, isn't it?
And it would have been difficult for me to argue with the mother of the child, yet there are 7.5 billion of us on this planet, and there'll be soon 9.5 billion of us, and there's only 150,000 gorillas left.
That's right.
So if you were looking at it from a numbers perspective, the gorilla's life is far more valuable.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, because you said
but
that
that's not an
lions
easy debate to have. Paul Watson went public with that.
Yeah.
Have a great respect for him for it.
Yeah.
But, you know, to have that debate with most people is quite difficult.
It is touchy.
And it's more difficult than saying veganism to not. That's where you're saying actually the child should have died to protect the animal, which was far more rarer.
Sure.
But having said that, it's an important discussion that has to be had.
Do you think a utopian world would be vegan?
Sorry?
Do you think a utopian world would be vegan? A world without any violence, peace, compassion and harmony? Would that be vegan?
You know, it'd be interesting, and I've not looked at all the research to say that if you don't eat meat, there is some I've seen to say that people are less violent towards each other, they're less likely to be killing each other. But there are societies where veganism, vegetarianism is not predominant, but it makes up a significant part of the population, where there have been significant violence between India and Pakistan, for example. So it doesn't stop it. And I think there are more fundamental drivers of violence than just what we eat. But it is an interesting area to look at.
So, sorry, this is the absolute final question. If you had a choice between living a life where you killed animals, killed humans, or killed neither, which one would you choose?
Kill neither.
And you could do that, can you?
I think, yes, you can.
How can you do that?
Because you can go to a vegan lifestyle and you can adopt it. But I'll tell you now, personally, it's difficult. And I think a lot of people who do it at times break it. And they probably feel ashamed that they've broken it because they've eaten a bit of chocolate or they've done something. But, you know, we are human. I think if you try constantly, I think it's getting easier because the manufacturers of food... Here's another dilemma. Would you support the production of test tube meat if it was cultured in a laboratory environment where no animal died?
Yeah, I would.
Eat it?
Would I eat it? Maybe not, but I definitely encourage it so that the wider population who do consume meat could.
Yeah, but you know, but it would still be a meat product, but it would come out of
cruelty.
No animal would have suffered as a consequence.
Exactly, and that's the basis until
I think personally that type of technology is coming.
Yeah, it is.
And I think it would be hugely beneficial to the environment. You know, I've worked in the soya food industry, the meat alternative business I've been involved with for a number of years before I came into this area. So I'm very familiar with that technology. I've worked with corn and Tival and all those businesses, and Alpro. So I understand all the issues that drive that technology. Most of it is trying to produce products that meet the requirement that humans want in diversity and taste of food. If we can do that without inflicting pain and suffering on animals, I'm 100% behind it.
Yeah, and we kind of live a life where we don't inflict pain and suffering on animals genuinely, can't we? So we don't have to wait for these cultured meats. We can do it every day without them.
We can play a part. Your diet's only one aspect of it. Travelling, the interaction we do in cities and towns, the way we use energy, the way we move around, all has massive impacts on wildlife. Your diet is just one area. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing, but it doesn't negate you having a negative impact on animals. And on the fact that we're just here breathing or reproducing, because you know, I don't have that debate with vegans. If I don't have children, am I in a more sustainable way than if you had children as a vegan? Because you could have a vegan, you could have 4 of them. Okay, and they might make choices to be vegan themselves or not, or their children. But I've got none at the moment. So I could say that maybe I'm more sustainable. I put less impact on the planet than you with your 4 children, even if they were following a vegan diet. So, you know, there's an element of that as well.
Well, thank you so much. That was really interesting. That point you said at the end was really great, so thank you.